Silent crickets. I don't think so. I think we're playing this thing out the way it's supposed to be played out, and I'm not liking it too much, but that's the problem. We're being played for our weaknesses, and no one seems to be picking that up. At least not, no one in the general. As you can see, all these things come on us pretty quickly. It was developing the whole time. I would suggest to you that all that we're seeing may sound like things that were predictable, really told to us before in lots of ways. I tended to come through this by researching law, if you can say that. At some level, there's all these different authorities that came up to bring their form of control, when ultimately there's a natural control that we really should be following a little bit more. Although, that said, if we can use the word human, the human animal's a pretty dastardly beast. And it's kind of funny how just recently and lately I seem to keep recycling over into this idea of that we're told, referenced in the Bible, no less, the Cain killing Abel, brother killing brother, brother killing over his failure, his own failure to do what was his responsibility to do, and blaming someone else and taking on his brother, which that's the indication of a very severe defect in people, which plays out in the world and has played out. I'm certain of it ever since. That there's a lot of people that have to step up, and when they don't, they'll blame somebody else and they'll crucify people, as we also saw the evidence, to cover themselves on their own biased, narrowed views. What is given over to people to do, what is demanded of them to do, is never by the demander actually met. In fact, I just had a private instance happen to me where demands were made of me to produce my position. I did, yet on the other side, the demander had no position. And this is what this world seems to have rolled down to. Somehow it was also interesting, for me it's interesting a bit. It was a discussion, something about gun control. And the question was asked me, what was asked of the gentleman that was telling me the story about what would be some kind of a symbol about a so-called conservative image of gun control, about the concept of gun control. And it occurred to me very quickly, it would be, if I can call it conservative, I don't even know how to put these titles on. I don't even think this way, but a more principled place, I guess, in my mind, is not necessarily a conservative title placed on it, but a more principled place would be to explain, solve Cain. Because it's not about the gun. It's about this failed nature in us to actually be true to and honest, if you will, and truly equal. A lot of people claim equality, that they want it. A lot of people claim to be carrying the banner of protection for people, but that's the cover of a psychopath, essentially, working on even I would hope that people are helping other people. It really was a long time till my life has been run through to find out that that's really just a lie. A lot of people use that. You see, like non-profits and stuff, they'll tell you that they're trying to help something, but in fact they're using that as a cover to do crime. Now we're finding out about these cancer foundations, and then underneath that's got to be because the industry underneath that is causing the things that cause the need to make medicines that never cure you, actually bring you right almost to death. And I guess they're really happy when you actually survive the poisoning to try and so-called cure cancer, stop it. They don't tell you they're curing it. And they get more, the system is made to parasitically feed off of you. And we're coming to that truth in a more general understanding. But that then still brings on that question for us, choose ye this day. Choose what you're going to do. Now, I've been bringing up more of these references to the Bible because this is a history book. In fact, you were hearing on UCY, if you tuned in there, Clint Richardson came on to this for his own, found out that book is also, depending on how you use it, it's a tool, and you can see many things in it. If you start to adjust and understand, there's there's coding in there that we talk about it on a legal lawful condition. The bottom line is that only the authors know or can tell you what that is, and so we have to be the super sleuths to figure out what that's about. But we're given enough knowledge in there to find out that the world is not a nice place and not going to be a nice place. And I just came at it from understanding these terms. Also, that the way the world works, and in large part, the Cain-Abel condition reflects itself over and over and over to find out that international law is really just this balancing act that goes on, and that's only tentative as long as the parties will recognize it and honor it. And then I realize that each one of us is that same international independent state. If we're going to think we have a right in our own self and a property right in our own self, in other words, we have the authority to say none of your business. If we don't, then we're living in that dog-eat-dog world. Well, that's the world that you can be accosted for even being innocent. That's the world of Cain and Abel. I'm not going to go in and I'm not analyzing that part. I'm saying that there's a nature in us that really reflects that story, that event. Even if it is just a story, it's a truth that I see around, that we have a bunch of, we tend to, and not everybody, we tend to want to be able to, like I've said before, point the finger and forget there's three pointing back. We tend to want to, we see people that will make allegations of a better world, and yet when you look at that, everyone forgot to ask, well, who were they to make that determination, first of all, and secondly, has that betterness ever been tested? That's just an ad statement. This butter is better. This car is better. Better than what? Better than a pile of junk? Better than not? What is it? Better than the last kind? Better than tomorrow? What is it? We let these the commercialness and advertisement of the world pervade our thought. So all that said, to come into today, as I was telling you, this Obama guy, he was a symbol, as I could see it way back when I first heard his first speech when he came to the world stage. And I said, this guy's too polished, too soon, that we've never heard him. There's something very wrong with the way he's doing this. He's got all the tools of a real pretender, a deceiver, and certainly that's borne out that I said that he's the symbol of the failure of what actually Lincoln was, what actually Roosevelt was, and he's the next iteration, which, as I had researched it back in before 2000, was this current Middle Ages condition, the corporate collective consequence, that will bring causes on that that try to get us to believe in or on them, and persuade us that idea is better than the principle, and that you actually don't have a place to have an idea beyond that principle. That we see deceptive things coming, and I said that he's this unqualified one in Obama. He's going to be bringing on Civil War 2.0, and I think it's actually multidimensional beyond that. That's just an idea statement, but you're seeing it coming on in spades. What also is being missed is there's another war on us. What we hear is Battlefield America, and then there's another one on top of that, which we now are hearing coming, as I now develop for you the managers of all this, the Bar Association, to support what has been known from before and being brought in on us for decades and decades and decades. What is now coming on the stage is I'm having to now discuss it right now, because I was going to come too late if I let there's so much to talk about. I had to update everything I was doing to talk about this today. That we're now hearing, this guy, this Concentrated Evil, the head of Concentrated Evil, is now visiting the United States of America. That these things are here that are now going to work out in an accelerated manner. If you thought they were going fast, you watch how this goes. Now, it's all going to still be incremental. I don't see any disasters generally, and that doesn't mean that tomorrow an asteroid doesn't actually hit us, and it's a natural thing. But the point I'm making is that in the scheme of people, not the nature, but the people, in how they interact with themselves, and these as I identify the Concentrated Evil, and those behind that actually that keep this thing going for hundreds and hundreds of years. I can't even get my mind around that part, but in fact it sits there to be working in the world today. That we have these this war. I want to start here today on the war. I've been telling you, Civil War 2.0, and I told you the condition that was established in North Carolina that went after that all of a sudden by hop, skip, and jump, we're on the back of a car bumper, and we're looking at a little flag. I said that was the attack, that's the war being declared against the example of independence. and being independent, and having a actual state that was independent of another entity. That we now, and I said yesterday, I brought up the news about the culture of the idea or the fact, I suppose, of the woman of the South and the culture that wraps around that. Well, now this week, I just want to go quickly, and we have to get on to this other continuation from last week on showing how dastardly the bar is positioned to bring on the things you're going to see happening this week that are now going to that are going on the world stage. But 23 students are suspended after defying school's ban on the Confederate flag. So remember, we'd said that the flag was going to be destroyed, the way of life, the culture of the South would be destroyed. Any mention of it, the free speech around that's going to be destroyed. All under the idea that it's not, it's a racism and it's inequality. And so here we have students standing up, wanting to be free speaking what they believe they want to do, how they want to represent, what their culture says that flag actually means. And they were beat down by a system that professes equality and tolerance and diversity. And so I don't remember. I was going to read this a little bit, but it's in Virginia, Christiansburg, Virginia, of all places. See, this is the core, right? These things happen in certain ways at certain places to be attacking the core. These are not happenstance things that the occurrence of which is their notice to us. If we, again, the eyes to see and the ears to hear type stuff. And I can only hope that I'm always bringing the accurate facts and truth and rightness of this information. I think it's played out when you see this, of all places, a Christiansburg high school, an attack on a Confederate thing, an attack where the culture was centered in a Christian belief, is being attacked by a school that is supposed to be embracing tolerance and equality and multiculturalism, which is the hallmark of this sustainable development. Christiansburg High School students were suspended this week for protesting the school's ban on the Confederate flag for wearing clothes emblazoned by the divisive symbol. Well, this story, divisive symbol, it's not a divisive symbol if you believe in inclusion, if you believe in tolerance, if you believe in all this. But see, this is the propaganda by the media to make it divisive. People make it divisive. Not everything in the world do I like. I would be divisive against anything I didn't like, and there's a lot of that. There was no guarantee in the world that I'd be in the world, and all of a sudden, wherever I walked, that was a compliment to what I thought in my world. And yet we have this thing called free speech as well, supposedly in the Constitution, that is degraded. And you find out when you look at the school system, that's internal to the state. It's no different than that license plate thing I was talking to you about in Texas, that they said, well, this is a state property, and the state can dictate whether or not there's a Confederate flag on its property. In this case, it's a state school, and they're going to tell you whether or not you actually have civil rights. Well, they're telling you have civil rights. I meant that way. You're going to find out whether or not you have your freedom of speech, which you don't. And under a banner of tolerance, equality, and multiculturalism. I've told you before, there's only intolerance to anything outside what they're pushing. There's only going to be inequality made unless you conform to what they are creating for you. And there's there's going to be no diversity, no cultures other than the one that's imposed. And I've got to keep moving here. All this stuff to talk about that. I hope we get to the final act here today before this Pope moves on. I'm going to explain all of this again when we read the documents. That's the game plan coming in for the next 15 years. You can just read it. This is not secret anymore. It never has been. People now are becoming more aware of it. I've been waiting for the time to be able to speak of it without sounding like I was going off on some deep end. Not because I could care less about someone calling me I'm going off the deep end. I did that when I found out America wasn't what it was. I looked pretty weird when I started to just talk about that then. So I'm beyond that. It's all for all the listeners. If you insult the integrity of the mind of the listener in their cluelessness or what they thought they knew, you turn them off, and then I'm turning people away. Now, I turn apparently quite a bit of people away. But I don't know how to help that. I'm not speaking negatively. I don't speak at people. They just take it that way. And this is the problem. Now, if I can't get the message out, and you all who are listening and retell the message that you find, that you research, that you know, that's doing nobody any good at all. We have to be able to still communicate. We have to, and my thought is that we got a lot of literally clueless people. I've got to give them that clue. I've got to give them the question why somehow. And a lot of people have the mouse click, or you have the channel switcher, and they do. People vote with their ears. No different. So if we insult people, not that we intended to, but if they take it, see, this is how the world has been set up now. I feel insulted is now the rule. And everybody now walks around feeling insulted. And that it was just a creation of a tool against them, a prejudice that they didn't understand was being used against them. But here we don't have free speech at school. You cannot now, and this is not now, this has been, but this is now in the context of what that symbol meant. Underneath, we now see a school that was in a system that was supposed to allow for free speech, but also more, if you try to find the truth of what they're imposing, they were stating it was for tolerance and inclusion, equality, and culture. In fact, there's nothing of the sort coming on. So you have to understand this language that's coming on us is a code. It's not what it is, and if it's coming on you right now, it's going to get even faster and worse. The organization is far wide. As I said, we're infiltrated and surrounded. If anybody can decide to not regard it. But you're going to choose that way that wins. And if there's a lot more of the organization on those people that want to change the lifestyle that was promised, at least in promise, at least given to us as an idea of what being free is with a government that was actually constrained, you're going to have to step up. And that's not my decision. That's not my demand. That's the demand of the nature of us. Because when I saw Cain, Abel, and I started to understand the condition, those of us that are innocent, or as innocent as we are, will still be killed if we're not aware of that. And so this is that's the nature of this world that we have to really guard against. So the Civil War 2.0 is still going. They're now attacking people that want to step up for freedom of speech and demand equality with all the other rainbow warriors out there. They're not going to get it. So you see, this is a lie. But Civil War 2.0 is still raging. There's only a few warriors right now in that, and their students, which I'm encouraged a bit. But unless they understand the condition, see, they can't. They're trying to fight that directly instead of fighting what's actually causing it. Another thing in these wars that are going on, or at least the rumors of wars that we hear were supposed to be going on. Clock ticks on U.S. and Syria strategy, and Assad pounds IS targets. Russia sends jet fighters. So now this thing that's boiling up in Syria, the question as to whether or not Russia's bringing stuff in is now being answered slowly. They're not doing it all really quickly, but they're now bringing things in. And America and Kerry, these buffoons in Washington, are essentially admitting that their plan is now being thwarted, that they didn't know what they were actually doing, and it appears, ironically, that Russia's presence will be calming the condition. It still puts everything on tension, but the United States is already stepping up and said they don't want to have an interference. The United States does not want to have a misunderstanding between what it's doing militarily and what now Russia is stepping in militarily to do. And you know that Russia will not pay attention to if it comes in, they're now talking about 10,000 more troops. This is not going to be for a war. This is going to be to kick the tool of the United States of America, the Zionists, Britain, France, and all those people, the Zio West, out. And try to calm that area down and certainly their interests, no doubt. But for my thought, that should have never been made into a place of turmoil. As I said, what's a barrel of turmoil worth? They could fuel and run the world on that economy alone. The way they're doing this, that needs to be really excised from our existence. It probably won't be, because we know that innocent brother can be killed by brother who does not want to take on his own responsibility, that Russia becomes a calming influence to kick back out the turmoil that's being caused and allows these people to go back and start living their lives again. That, I think, from that sake, that people that really have no place to be being manipulated as pawns, the migration of which plays into the next 15-year plan that this Pope is underwriting right now. This is a heinous, heinous guy. That it's in the documents. We don't have to go for it. People who conjecture about this is about migration and the mixing of people, absolutely, but it's in the plan. It's not hidden. This is not a hidden thing. And so understand this is one of the dimensions that are being worked on. That this Zio West, it actually comes down to this global governance constraint structure framework. This is what Russia is going to squelch for its interests, which for me I'd like to see just for the people to move back to their own house, like the 7-year-old said, just let me go back to Syria, my home, and I don't have to be a refugee. That you're going to find, I'm going to read here soon. I really got to keep up on this quicker. You're going to read that this migration refugee condition is the plan. It's already this agenda that the Pope is going to now promote underneath this climate change nonsense, this fraud, another fraud, and the economy's running underneath that, the different tools and the development funding sources like carbon taxation and the water attack that they're going to do. Pretty soon you'll be seeing some taxation on some of that, but not even on the water, but on the control of it by other monetization behind the scenes. The economy by electron, essentially, is being developed. Be outside of your local. You'll still be using whatever medium they have. It'll still be the FRN, but the global governance system, those that are partners, those that are stakeholders to that system, they will not be using this dirty currency that they hand to you. So don't be surprised if you never see. It's always going to be, well, not always. Not if you listen behind the woodshed, it's not transparent. But all this will be transparent to those that either cannot or will not see or hear what's going on. And all this has been told to us. So Russia is going in now more earnestly. I'm not necessarily believing, because of the way the United States acted, I'm not believing that this is the fuse that's about being lit for a World War III. We're so far beyond that now, folks. You missed it if you're looking for World War III. But this is hopefully a calming effect to get people stabilized back again. That will actually have a reverse effect on sustainable development, because the sustainable development requires the use of human migration. As you hear them treating you like animals, the herd mentality, the herd immunity, it's all really consistent. Now, one more thing about what this Obama buffoon is about and what he causes in the Civil War I was predicting would come because of what he is as a symbol. Again, and I got to just say this, I really haven't studied symbology that much. I did get a focus of it when I was doing heraldry with the Society for Creative Anachronism, when I became an apprentice armorer, making armor, and worked again, just as I would have as a guild. For 7 years I worked to become an armorer, essentially. To be able to produce it on my own and design it and do all that. That in that culture, that subculture of the United States, I was able to understand medieval history and actual occurrences and things that happened for the reasons. That symbology became very apparent to me. I didn't go much farther as to look at how it now is being used to expose all these other things, but because I have the basic knowledge, I can also see symbols in action, symbols in people. You start reading the history of the people involved and how they got us to where we are. Then I got into reading international law. You start seeing the documents, and that all plays out in these international diplomatic documents. If you know it, you start learning how to read. I keep saying if you know what you're looking for. When you're reading these, you start to learn what to see. And you'll know that when you start taking that journey for yourself. But this symbol of Obama was weighing heavy in my observations early on. It's carried on through. We got Civil War 2.0. We got Battlefield America on top of that. And then this guy comes up and he gets in, and we all heard this. Anybody who was behind the woodshed and anybody who I've been affiliated with in all our broadcasts and the people, all of us. When this guy got the Nobel Peace Prize, we called bunkus on it, and I made the observation that this proves these international organizations prove that they're setups to cause political at least political seed dropping to be nurtured in the direction they want it to go. That just in the news, Nobel Secretary regrets Obama Peace Prize. And what was very interesting and telling in this is I was pointing out that all these international organizations are created, no matter what they tell you, no matter what they sign into and what their mission statement is, to advance the global agenda that has been planned for a long, long time. That it comes out now, the Nobel Peace Prize, like I would innocently want to know that we have people in the world that really are on the cutting edge of advancing the counter Cain versus Abel condition of our natural inclinations. And really one of our duties is to try and suppress that part of non-responsibility and blaming it on somebody else. But that you would think that there's a group of people really looking to find the example in the world of peace, are nothing more than the political puppets that we, special interest puppets, that those of us that started seeing this have identified it. That this guy came out to say that it was a Geir Lundenstad told the AP news agency that a committee hoped the award would strengthen Mr. Obama. Instead, the decision was met with criticism in the U.S., and rightfully so. Many argued he had not had any impact worthy of the award. Well, those of us were saying, no, he's the antithesis of peace, actually. Mr. Ludestad, writing in his memoirs, made these statements that they said that even Mr. Obama himself had been surprised. He made that statement in the news. Quote, no Nobel Peace Prize ever elicited more attention than the 2009 prize to the unqualified one, Barack Obama. No, excuse me, I added the unqualified one. Quote, even many of Obama's supporters believe that the prize was a mistake, he says. In that sense, the committee didn't achieve what it had hoped for. What it had hoped for. This was an intentional act to persuade the politics of the world. And so we have, by their own words, the statement that these things you see on the world stage are nothing but political tools. As I say, it's all about politics and commerce. And when I told you the United States was made, if you look at the documents leading right before and then the documents of the Constitution of the United States, it was dealt in as one aspect of actual full sovereignty, the political aspect and the commercial aspect, not the entirety. And you'll see that the United States was really, when you hear it, we can focus it down to it was just a development corporation of the Crown. And that wasn't, the Crown is just a cover. So no, that was the financial side, the king. They're all covers for these other nested authorities. So here it is. The Nobel Peace Prize was regrettably given to Obama, but because it didn't fulfill the political ends that the committee intended that they would have, showing you that these are all, it's just like, these are trinkets for your entertainment. All these soldiers that go get the medals, the trinkets that they put on the chest of people with that luckily maybe are still alive, that are blown up, are all cost a few bucks to make, while trillions in control and personnel and money transfers in the war itself. The human resource of active part of which is given trinkets, is what these things are to us in the world stage. The peace, it doesn't matter who they give it to. These peace awards are politically driven. They're trying to drive us into some idea, and they try to exalt people that may have some merit, but like we can clearly see in the case of Obama, completely not correct. On the world stage again, and the deception of what's going on. But then inside the stories, you see the truth. As we move back into back to the bar, and who the democracy and rule of law is, and what it actually speaks to, what it's actually committed to enforce, what it actually is promoting. Vatican welcomes Iran agreement, urges greater nuclear disarmament. Okay, fine. What are they going to say? No, it doesn't really matter. But what was really fascinating in this report was what they said, what the secretary speaking for the Holy See is actually interested in, and consistent with what I'm bringing up regarding where this thing's going, and it's coming on the world stage. It's stage left for some of this, and stage right. On comes the Pope, going to these very important places that have never been. He's never been before. But in this report here, of them underwriting the Iran deal, like they have anything to say about this, is some fairly interesting statements that are very consistent, wholly consistent with where this thing is all going. And I didn't know this, but the IAEA, which is an International Atomic Energy Association or something, is now exalted in this. I didn't know that this atomic investigatory body really had all this kind of a power. But many around the world are not aware of the IAEA's role in promoting sustainable and integral human development. Consider this, folks. This is coming from the Holy See. This is the Vatican. This is the Pope. Although they're different authorities, actually literally different authorities, they all speak from the same body. And so be careful you think it's a different authority. It's all just one face with a whole bunch of mouths. It's kind of like the Janus head. One direction speaks one way, and the back direction can speak the other. These are all from the same body. The IAEA helps open up the interesting possibilities of harnessing the power of science. Listen to the words, because you're going to hear them again in the next hour and a half. And the power of science and technology in addressing pressing problems to poverty, health, and the environmental degradation. Peaceful applications of nuclear technologies allow many states to come closer to the achievement of their development goals. Their development goals. He's not saying that it's different than integral human development, remember here. So understand what you're hearing, what he's saying here. This is already an integral system that they're weighing in on. In all the ways you're going to hear being spoken of in what's coming on the world as a plan, and implemented and created by the Bar Association, I'm showing is integral with that and supporting it. Peaceful applications of nuclear technologies allow many states to move closer to the achievements of their development goals and are in keeping with Pope Francis's call in his recent encyclical letter, Laudato Si, for responsible stewardship of our human and natural resources. Our human and natural resources. Who are these people that say that they own human resources? They own the natural resource. That these states are already in keeping with Pope Francis's call. And in this, if you can't see the integrated condition that this guy is just coming now to take control over, that has been before you, before us, all of our life, coming in now to build into fruition, you really start to have to look closer at this. This is right this week. And this is coming out right at the right time, right ahead of these meetings that they explain, and I want you to keep track of this. It's our human resources and our natural resources that they're taking claim to all of this stuff. And I learned a long time ago, I guess you can believe it, or you can decide on how to defend against it. And this is the point I guess I'm making. These people are treating people as human resources. We've heard all this before: human capital, human resources, the workforce productivity. Humans are monsters, no inheritable blood. It's over and over and over again, all this stuff. Our stewardship of our human, our animal resources. Don't miss this connection here. This guy's already this organization's already talking consistent with everything I've ever said before about how this works out. What we find in the Title 50, where we tie in Title 7 of the United States Code, Title 15 of the United States Code, on Title 12 when you understand the underpinnings of Title 50, on and on and on. Actually, what Clint Richardson, as I explained to him what Title 50 was, what he found out when he was doing his lethal injection about that you can be experimented on, that given that the state government has given itself, this fiction has given itself license to experiment on you. So important, the text of which he read in that lethal injection documentary. This has been in writing for a long time. Title 50 relates way back and has its power and authority to necessity in the Trading with the Enemy Act, enforcing a financial construct. It's all there, folks. So moving on. Now, I was talking a little bit, and I had to kind of jumping a little bit here. I'm not going to. I'm going to mention some things. I would like to have some people who engaged in this. With what is going on and the collusion that's going on, the type of collusion, if you start understanding what's going on about this, and I couldn't find one of the acts. I'd like to have someone at least, for their own interest, a trail they can blaze to find out some very interesting information. There's some acts, supposedly acts that they're supposed to be enforcing. The problem is that the system itself won't enforce them against itself, and that regards now the people, and we have the power, folks, if we just step up into it in the 9th and 10th Amendment, something that can't be destroyed in us. They can try to ignore it, but there's an objective basis that is in black and white. Though they may not want to agree with it, they can't necessarily, without exposing themselves to be the real criminals they are, they can't really attack you. And this is kind of the tool we're using behind the scenes on what we're doing with the Jefferson Mining District in attacking those that are in offices of government that are actually committing felonies and worse, treason and worse. Utilizing these things that we've been talking about in the last week or two, and otherwise, they're just criminals on the outright. But I heard there was some information that came through, and I didn't have time to apply it. But the way this collusive nature goes, the way these people in government are working this, and the way they communicate outside of the government as agents of our government, there was a couple of acts. One I couldn't remember and I couldn't find. I haven't had a chance in the time to find it, but what I was interested in, maybe somebody would be interested to research now whether or not the Clayton Antitrust Act may not be applicable, and whether or not prohibited foreign trade practices by issuers under Title 15 of the U.S. Code 78DD might not be applicable to the way they're bringing this condition in, to at least show, in the first instance, an initial response in law, or that they're now called out. And when you do that, see, it's not you being a conspiracy. It's not that you're saying they're conspiracy you can't prove. It's not you just coming up with opinions, which I've heard for decades. People come up with their own ideas, but they can't really substantiate them. Or they can substantiate certain things, but they're actually not applicable in the way the jurisdiction itself operates. And that's been a real killer for a lot of people that I can see. You really have to get within the jurisdiction and deal with it. You don't be afraid of admiralty. You jump in with both feet and you put your water wings on and you make sure that you can maneuver around in it. And you speak about it in the ways that it needs to be spoken to so that you can defeat the application part of it. And a lot of it's just showing that it can't be applied if you understand how that works. That there may be, if some of us would just step up to do more, look at the condition that we're looking at with all these foreign ministers coming in and like the Holy See and coming to talk to the president and being invited by the speaker and all this. I can't remember where it's all at, but these were supposed to be high crimes and misdemeanors at least. Because they're advocating religion onto the country. They're advocating literally the destruction of the Republican Reform Representative Government that they have also taken an oath to protect. It's right in front of us to document in a nice short form. Some of us, if we didn't know it, and we were thinking that maybe Agenda 21 didn't exist, it was because that was a lie. The Bar Association knew it existed. You hear me talk about it. Mega Agenda 21 resurrected with Pope's help. It's here now. It's been now in the news. I don't have to hold back and say that I'm the only one and you're just going to disregard what it's being said. It's now obvious. There's a report I got. They brought in all these things called the Shemitah, the Jade Helm, blood moons. Yeah, we've talked about all that. These are really important symbols, and they do coincide, and they are a coincidence, some of which mean something, some of which don't. It's interesting, and I've told you there looks to be some integration with this Jade Helm and what happened. The Civil War 2.0 was I think it's almost won already. It depends on whether or not there's going to be a grassroots substantial influx to to withstand the attack, the tolerance attack on the intolerance against a cultural view that is represented by a flag and the statues and the Southern Belle and all these other things. That this agenda, mega agenda, is on us. It's the new agenda for the next 15 years. If you didn't understand that this is all being planned about, we're moving into this week when this transforming our world, the 2030 agenda for sustainable development, now hits the scene. Now, what have I been talking about last week was the purveyors of this within your nations, because this is wherever democracy, so-called, and rule of law exists, you have this organization, the influence or the affiliation of this organization, that we have the documents to show now, if you didn't know it before. Not my opinion, never has been. Just read it for yourself. And then we applied what they had committed to, what they had confessed to, what they had admitted to, the crime of their confession. We applied that to them. And when we brought it to, we invoked a court that exists, but is not part of the current structure in the way they have it set up. And then we enforced that part. They couldn't, this fiction, this thing that's on us, this active, motive, invisible, transparent to most people, force and effect, advocating what the Pope is coming to take the mantle for, that is going to be protected by the most powerful military in the world, in the United States of America. The other symbol of what Obama is, as we went through that one picture of him sitting on the thousand swords of the 1,000 jurisdictions that have succumbed to this power. That this is what's coming on, this group called the Bar Association and its affiliates. I tied it over for you to International Bar Association. This is the advisor to the Holy See that sits as a state non-voting member in the UN. The tool of this and other things as well. It's another cover organization. I'm going to now start reading the final document, and then I want to get over to this other agenda, and you're going to hear absolutely everything that you heard in that Vatican radio report, and everything, the refugees, it's all there. All this, why I tell you it's a financial construct, it's all there. This is going to be a slave world, and they're going to promote poverty. I'm going to give you an insight here. They're going to promote that they're protecting and securing people away from poverty, and that definition of what poverty is will be baseline subsistence level existence. And as I've suggested to you, it's called austerity. They will impose austerity, claiming that was bringing everybody equally out of poverty, because poverty is designed as baseline common needs subsistence, while they create a reciprocal obligation because of the system to work for that system in workforce production, the human resource they talk about. So that's coming in, hopefully in the next hour. But let me start reading through this last document. Listen to what the Bar Association. You think that they're there to protect you, that they got legal, that they're there to know better than you and do it for you better than you think you can yourself. That obligation to do for yourself, that responsibility, was never removed from you, and we didn't really understand that, and we were bullied and promoted into believing these surrogate representatives of state authority were going to mean us any good. So here's the words, not mine. I'll read it. This is from 2013, as recent as we can find that I didn't need to go any further when I found these things. American Bar Association, remember, go to their website and go find their affiliates. You'll see how deep this connection is. Adopted, and then understand the American Bar is a member of the International Bar Association. So it keeps going, and wherever you find democracy and rule of law, that's them, folks. This is the movers and the shakers of how this comes on you, secretly, silently, and transparent to you, transforming your world right before your eyes, because your eyes are blind and blind and blind. And you don't hear so good either. We're dumb, dumb, dumb. It's not my judgment, folks. It's just we are. We are just that. That's what we are. And our job, if we wish to do it, if we don't want to be run down, is we necessarily have to pick ourselves up and do it ourselves, despite the overwhelming odds that we're facing right now. What a heroic feat this will be, really. American Bar Association adopted by the House of Delegates, adopted by the House of Delegates August 12 to 13, 2013. Resolution resolved that the Bar Association reaffirms its 1991 and 2003 commitments to sustainable development and defines sustainable development as, quote, the promotion of an economically, socially, and environmentally sustainable future for our planet and for present and future generations. Our planet. The Bar Association owns a planet? Did you get a say of this? Whose future generations? What present generations? Sustainable development is the promotion of a three-legged stool, I will say, that is not of your making either, the words of which are in code. But there's some defenses within even American law, I'll point this out. If we would just embrace them, will give us, we use this a lot, and it really puts a stymie on them. There's just not enough of us to really stop it. We stop them in our own way, but there's such a grand amount of people, millions, literally millions in the world doing this. That just how we know how to stop them needs to be universal to us in stopping them, the tools of which need to be universal, not in certain spots, which is part of my biggest frustration. I really, as we were talking at the Jefferson Mining District meeting Friday, this was... if we just had the people, the eyes to see, ears to hear, and then the action behind it, this thing is really over from these people. As miners used to always do, they didn't cotton, they didn't cotton the lawyer come into the mining camps. They were deceivers. They knew that. They'd run them out. They'd tar and feather them. They'd hang them. They'd run them out. They'd call them they were worse than horse thieves. So this is a pretty, talk about cultures and understanding things. I'm going to learn about that, about the mining culture. That's what they did with these people. So these people are a core tool, implementer of this condition. Sustainable development is the promotion of economically, socially, and environmentally sustainable future. You need to understand its code words. Further resolve that the American Bar Association urges all governments, lawyers, and ABA entities to act in ways that accelerate progress towards sustainability. This is what I say, the bums rush has been on since at least 2013. The call went out. This is coming. I could just see it watching. That's why I've been talking to you all these years about, okay, here's this another thing that's developed. Here's another thing that's developing. They're compounding. The snowball's gaining speed here. The snowball that can melt in hell if we can get it there, but may not if we don't stand there to put our little side directive as it's rolling down, collecting up the mass of humanity. If we're not down there to keep hitting it along the side as it's rolling down to direct it to into the hell that it needs to go to, it's going to eventually run us all down. And so we have a job to do, and if we don't, then it just takes down, it just envelops this snowball, like the climate change that they're not telling you about, envelops the whole world, and we become this big ice ball, frozen. Simple as that, the way they got this thing working out. Remember, I told you a long time ago, if the Earth is in a natural diminishing capacity for warmth, if they start doing any weather modification, they will actually accelerate us under the theory, the unproven, absolutely unprovable theory of warming, which is certainly not even close to where it's ever been in the Earth's cycling system. If they started messing around on a temperature declination cycle, they will accelerate and deepen that cycle. So be very cautious on what you're preparing for, and be very cautious on what they claim that they're helping you to. But further resolved, on top of the first two, that the American Bar Association encourages law schools, legal education providers, and others concerned with professional development to foster sustainability in their facilities and operations, and to help promote a better understanding of the principles of sustainable development in relevant fields of law. So law schools, all your lawyers being trained are all promoters of this thing, all the operations of the organization and all their subsidiaries and all their agents, all their attorneys that are sitting in the seats of advice and counsel to all your government agencies are being conditioned by this organization. If you're not, really got to put this in context for you. Don't just listen to my words. Start thinking about what I'm saying. Where are these people? How influential really they are You need to really see this, why it's going, how fast it can go, and why it's going there that quickly. That this guy coming from the Vatican comes to take the mantle of control, making a war on America, literally putting it in the crosshairs, as we heard last week. Report, Introduction, Sustainability in Context. Sustainable development has its origins in the conservation and environmental movements in the United States and other countries, in the laws that were adopted because of the movements, and in the lawyers that drafted and worked with clients to implement these laws. Long before the UN Conference on Environment and Development in Rio de Janeiro, UNSED, or Earth Summit, for example, the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969 declared a national policy, quote, to create and maintain conditions under which man and nature can exist in productive harmony and fulfill the social, economic, and other requirements of present and future generations of Americans, close quote. That's 42 U.S.C. 4331. Now, quickly, I need to just kind of interject, and may not have enough time to interject too much today, because I really want to get to some of the plan that tells you that these migrations, these financial constructs that are really killing us, all under the excuse. You notice the last three things of to fulfill social, economic, and other requirements. Other requirements was not the other thing in the list. It didn't say environment there, did it? Social, economic, environment. So there's a clue that even though they're pointing to the NEPA as the control for the United States, there's an out inside of NEPA, and that was that balance I talked to you breaking away last week. That there's the word environment is broken into two definitions. There's the natural environment, and one is the environment of mankind, the balance of which cannot defeat mankind. And when you know that, you realize that all these environmentalists never had the power that they've been wielding when we, the people of production, the entrepreneurs, didn't step up and say, hey, you can't go that far. The balance has gone way past where it's supposed to under the law. And we have been losing by our silence. And if we, as I've said before, all we have to do is bring a grain of sand, if that sand is a productive use of the earth, and that grain of sand would outbalance all the spotted owls and yellow-legged, one-legged-eyed frogs and whatever all geckos they're going to find that they got, and snail darters. You could throw all of that on the one scale, and one grain of productive sand would be enough to balance in favor of mankind's needs. That has not been done yet. That you see very clearly, it does not say environment in that statement at 42. It says social, economic, and other requirements. Well, those other requirements is mankind's environment, and the economic imposition under NEPA is not the UN imposition. That if we would just understand these distinctions and we would step up for ourselves, we have a very powerful voice, if I can use it that way, because that's what they say. We all have a voice. Well, we have more than a voice. We have an action. We have an obligation. Moving on now, as I hope that kind of clarified what's going on, how the United States was different, and how that protection is in the law. It's up to us to start bringing it in and to head off this bar association problem, where if you allow their judges and lawyers to look at it, they will not give the credit. They will keep everything on an administrative side and then not set the evidence to balance the scale with the proper evidence of mankind's needs. So economic needs underneath NEPA are mankind's economic. That's your counties. That's your local, your economic needs. That's the impacts to you. Where that's not the same economics that they're talking about under UN, which is global financial control. And money's spent to provide security to advance their infrastructure. Moving on now, in a world with a growing economy and population, widespread poverty, remember we heard that in the Vatican, when poverty now is their focus, our growing environmental degradation and greenhouse gas emissions, sustainable development will be increasingly important to lawyers and their clients. Why? Well, it's because that's the system of control. It's increasingly important that they do this, because they will move you from law into reflexive, relational things, and they're going to tell you what you relate to, and you're in a human capacity. You're not one of the peoples. you'll hear about, you're in a human capacity. Remember, you're the human resource. So be careful on how you read some of this, and always keep the pieces on the playing table here understood, that they're there, and when they're not speaking to certain things, they're speaking about other things. Thus, looking ahead and understanding an appreciation of sustainability concepts and principles will be critically important for the legal profession. Not for you, but for the legal profession, which you go to when you're ignorant. And that's not a judgment. We all are ignorant. We didn't understand this system that was built up around us and then started to shift, transform into the world that we're now seeing. And they say they're transforming the world. This is not a joke. This is not just some high-sounding aspiration. They're in place and they're going to get it done unless somebody decides it on their own. Each one of us has to decide to step up. Sustainability is the best understood as a framework or a perspective, lens, or approach for the integration or balancing of environmental protection, economic development, and social justice. So here we're having a definition of what the sustainability is, and you didn't hear it any different than what I've said. Remember, freedom is the range of motion within a framework. Within sustainability framework, your range of motion is what you're told it is. That's your liberty. This is exactly the same stuff I've been talking for years, right in this one sentence here, and I want you to remember that they use the word integration and balancing. They have to use that word because under NEPA, the balance has to weigh in favor of mankind's needs, not nature. Conservation is the non-use of a thing. All American disposal property law is for the use of something, not the non-use of something. Conservation used to be defined as the use of something in a continuing sustained yield manner. Not sustainable, but sustained yield manner. In fact, you see that in the ONC Act terminology. They don't use sustainability. People who misquote it say sustainable timber harvest, but it's sustained yield. What does that mean? That means that you're managing your resources in a way that they go forever. And if you're doing it properly, they can go forever. Why? That's what the term resource means. It resources itself. That's why minerals are an interesting anomaly. They call them resources, but they're not. You dig them out, they're gone. You got to wait. Mother Nature's got to make those things again years and years and years into the future. So that's why minerals are interesting, because they're only where they're found. You can't deny that you can only get them there. If you didn't have it, if you don't find them in that deposit, you have to go to that deposit. Anyway, moving on. These are three pillars. Here's the three pillars that they talked about. I told you the three legs on the stool. The environment and economic and social justice. Remember, social justice is a weapon. I talked about that in my last two broadcasts back. They're weaponizing social justice. That's what you hear about all these cases where they're going against the Confederate, the kids and the culture of the Confederate flag, but they'll justify the rainbow flag, and then they'll justify, marriage, gay marriage. But people don't understand that's a legal marriage. That's just a legal entity partnership. And people don't understand that are in man and woman. Heterosexual marriage, that they transgressed the legal, and they didn't keep themselves pure. They went in to the world instead of staying out of the world. And so this is very simple, that we did it to ourselves in most all these cases, and then when we didn't respond, we did that to ourselves as well. That's why it's easy for me not to blame others. I don't like that I'm being attacked. But then I just found out earlier in the broadcast, if I look at Cain, as Abel, I was innocent. I got killed because Cain couldn't figure it out. And he got mad and hurt and killed me. And that's in each of that spirit is in each of us. That didn't get removed. That's another problem I have with this whole scenario. That didn't get removed. There are three pillars or prongs of the core of every sustainability discussion. Remember, common core. Common being communist, if you will, or Marxist, or whatever you want to say, collectivist, fascists, common. The political common. The 1987 report of the World Commission of Environment and Development, or Brundtland Commission, after its chair, Gro Harlem Brundtland of Norway. Remember, I've told you, everything happens up like in Norway and the Netherlands. pay attention to, because this is the heart of what's going on as well, which led to the 1992 Earth Summit, employed a widely used definition that emphasizes the intergenerational aspect of sustainable development. So it's sustainable global slavery. Because this three-legged stool is an implementation from a central power that's the antithesis of the American way, if I can say it that way. This property disposal, property private to people, with the productive use and right of use exclusively to those people that chose to step up to do that. In other words, as a miner, I'm a grantee to a land. I claim because I fulfill an objective basis requirement that I have found something of value, and I now am obligating myself to extract that. So this is not just a freebie. I'm giving up a commitment to this, to focus my life to do that. And so that has been given to me as an exclusive holding. And this is not me, this is everybody with a patent land, or anybody with a land as patent like that. And this made us different than the whole world. Our system of records recording that and the supposed laws to protect it were what made us different in America than anywhere else. And I'll say that even to counter the authority the Pope said that organization owned the world. Because if it is connected, it's a grant. If it's not connected, it doesn't matter. They lied. If it is connected, they're the grantor. They can't come back on those disposals. This is where you find out about what being an elector on land is about. Those don't exist right now. But the point is, you start to find your status is a little bit different than what the common weal is. Development, it is said, is, quote, development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the needs of the future generations. Now, it seems innocuous. That almost sounds like it's the definition of conservation around the turn of the 1900s. But in fact, what they're talking about is the development is determined by them. It's the austerity they put on to people today, the present generations, and the next generations that come will be the present generations, which will also be under the austerity, and pay the benefit of this by their workforce integration as human resources. Many are familiar with the phrase sustainable development, and for good reason. At the Earth Summit 1992, the United States and other countries endorsed sustainable development and agreed to further sustainability in their domestic and international actions. 2 decades later, in 2012, the UN Conference of Sustainable Development in Rio de Janeiro, Rio +20, the United States and other countries reaffirmed their Earth Summit commitment and also agreed on the need to accelerate action to achieve sustainable development. So again, in 2012, the United States government agreed to accelerate this thing. Understand that nobody really heard about Agenda 21 up until just within 10 years ago. Then it became the big deal. But it's in fact been going on since, in officialness in 1992. How far behind we have been to begin with. For a time, sustainable development was the term used to imply operationally sustainability in most contexts, but more recently and more appropriately, sustainable development is used primarily in the international context, where international environmental protection and poverty reduction are twin goals, and there is a strong emphasis on the needs of less developed countries. Remember that part, because that plays into Agenda 2030. There's a statement that talks to the developing countries, the development countries, and the migration or refugee status that's a benefit to both. And how they explain how they're going to take advantage of this turmoil in people's lives to force them into this condition. As the ABA embarks upon its next phase of sustainable activities, it is important to understand that the sustainable approaches in other contexts of interests to the legal profession are described in slightly different terminology and emphasis. So you got to be paying attention to what those changes are. That's their adapting to try and remain invisible to you, transparent. For example, sustainability is applied to the corporate business world. Remember, dimensionally here, speak dimensionally. Think about it. Multidimensionally chessboards going on here. But in the corporate sense now, it's usually described as sustainable business practices. Is what you're going to hear. They're going to be doing all these governance multinationals do sustainable business practices. or the triple bottom line, implying that the traditional single economic line must now be reconciled with social and environmental considerations. Corporate social responsibility and corporate citizenship, it seems to me we actually changed the word now to citizenship. Remember, its are neutral. Its don't make an offense to anybody gender-wise, and its are just its. So we have corporate citizenship, to be academically correct now in this socially justified world, are closely related terms used interchangeably in the corporate sustainability context, and the substantive emphasis there vary based on assortment of industry codes and voluntary standards. So you see your United States industry codes are the definitive guide of how the human resources will be used within the corporate construct for the purposes of economic development to sustain that system. In the communities, we think these things are tools for us to make it. We put down an industry code down on a job application. This is all this is going back to some bean counter, and this is all going into the international data collection scheme. That's what we saw the evidence of in the European Union jumping over Europe, and all of a sudden people were able to have this card that allowed them to travel. What it was, it allowed them to travel from one previous nation to another where they couldn't before. Actually, well, they could, but there was because they're so constrained that they didn't. But that they'd move them for the purposes of jobs, workforce. Where the overarching EU became the slave master to move people around, and if you didn't like it, you didn't eat. You didn't move, you didn't eat. You didn't work. You didn't contribute, forget you. You're not part of it. In the community setting, now, from corporate setting to community setting, much progress has been made in the United States in advancing sustainability thinking through sustainable community initiatives. So every you go down locally and you hear the sustainable communities, this is this system being applied, imposed, and advanced and protected by the Bar Association as an intrusion and plunder. Remember, 1992 was when the Rio Summit is. 1994, I think it was Thomas Coffin brought the map of what implementation of Agenda 21 was to be the wilding of the nation and the forcing of people into urban habitat centers. When that evidence hit the Senate would not ratify that treaty. Why we don't have a treaty today? It's not a treaty. It's just the influence now they get us to put the gun to our head, shall we so choose, or let someone grab our arm because we won't not do it and put it to our head and then squeeze the trigger our own self. As they force you to have to, when they can they push you to the precipice, and then you say, well, you have to make the decision. Do you jump over the precipice and die, or do you just accept what they give you? And most people will just accept what they give you. Outside the U.S., these efforts have often been called local Agenda 21. So inside the United States, it was sustainable communities. When they were denying local Agenda 21 initiatives, but the outside the United States, they admitted that there was Agenda 21. That's just the program of action for sustainable development in this world governance plunder. Initiatives after the International Plan of Action for Sustainability adopted by the 1992 Earth Summit. In the United States, sustainability is used to describe local approaches that focus on quality of life, including smart growth in land use planning. Let me remind you, this is coming out of the Bar Association resolution of their House of Delegates. This is something your so-called legal profession is supposed to protect you, is actually advancing. Completely the contrary of the laws of the United States for the purposes of private property exclusive use and enjoyment. Absolutely. Remember, different levels. You got corporate level, you got community level. Another arena that has embraced sustainability thinking in just the last few years is the financial sector. Well, they did that on purpose because they didn't want you to lead with the most important punch, but it's always been about financial sector, monopoly, control, power, and well, that's where they bring this austerity principles, because you need what they have to give you. That's why when you try to have sustained yield in your life, become self-reliant, they step on you. In that sector, sustainability thinking and activity is organized around the label ASNG, Environment, Social, Governance. Environment, Social, Governance. This is the financial sector now of your life, okay? As the contracts are administered by the bar. But there is no doubt that this combination equates to the three pillars of sustainability. So they changed the economic quotient here in this to governance. So when we heard economic before, You might as well replace that word for governance, because these are the three pillars of sustainability. It's environment, social justice, and governance. And you'll find out in the Agenda 2030, it's the UN system of governance that everybody is going to speak the high praises to, which is, don't forget, the UN has got the Holy See sitting right aside inside that building being the influence, and I suspect it's been part of the authorship of all of this. And we'll see that as the encyclical came out. It's completely consistent, absolutely nothing new, except they actually get more clear that they mean you to be our natural resources and human resources. You're not yourself. You're not we the peoples that they'll talk about. You're someone else's human resources. Thus, the legal profession needs to understand how sustainability is applied in a variety of settings. In all of these settings, moreover, the term includes but is broader than the rule of law and good governance. So we've now gone through every paragraph here telling you what sustainable development is, and they just came to the one I've been pointing out all these years, that it's rule of law and good governance. This is democracy and the rule of law. Rule of law is them, folks. It's a bar association that is integral. It's just not here to promote it. It's integral with sustainable development. Now, I got to ask you, just as a quick aside, if you go to the bar association member who is now made an officer of the state courts and is also, in some states, literal agents of the state, what chances do you have to be lawfully protected? What chances do you have to be protected in a law court? What chances do you have to have law reflected in the hearing? And what do you think the odds are that the guy that's representing you doesn't know anything about the law? He's been trained in administrative provisions that could care less about that, because everything's owned by the state in the future. Applied now. So this is probably one of the most powerful statements I could tell you to show you the paragraph. In all of these settings, moreover, the term includes, sustainable development includes, but is broader than. If you don't think these people have big, large arms that can envelop the world, listen to the terms here. That the rule of law is enforcing at every turn. The broader than the rule of law and good governance. You don't hear government here, do you? No, it's the rule of law and good government. What governance are they talking about? But the Model Business Corporation Act model of governance that we read about last week. The rule of law and governance discussion is well established and important. Did you know it was well established? And if you didn't know it was well established, how much are you missing here? These people have been around for decades. How much are you missing here? You think you have constitutional rights working right now? You wonder why your constitutional rights are being involved, and you go to an attorney to try and get those enforced? What do you think's going on there? It's the interposition of the rule of law and good governance, not government and law. And that's why we're losing, if I can say, and that's why when we applied our injunction, it was a very special approach. We didn't approach it through an administrative territorial court. And when they tried to steal the case, we caught them. And the fiction can't speak into a law court, so they couldn't answer, and they didn't. So this tells me they know a lot. They know a lot more than I might have given them credit for, although I gave them all the credit in the world because they're that good. They're that devious. So they proved out a lot of stuff at the same time. The rule of law and good governance discussion is well established. Boy, did you know that? If you didn't, you're missing a big deal. This is the global play right here. To be effective, we must address all aspects sustainability in a variety of other settings. This is the direction, the directive. With this resolution, the one we're reading, the American Bar Association expresses its intention to approach sustainability issues in a broader sense and within a more robust framework. We talk about your freedom is the range of motion which in the framework they can get around you, which now is going to go beyond rule of law and good governance. The definition of sustainable development used in this resolution, quote, the promotion of an economically, socially, environmentally sustainable future for our planet, for future and present generations, captures this broader sense of sustainability. Folks, you better go find out what economically, socially, environmentally sustainable future for present and future generations is in the context of that frame. And if you don't, you're missing it. And this is only one aspect of this control structure. It's kind of fascinating to me. There's other things going on. I can only talk to so many things going on at once. But we can address this one pretty handily if we just step up to start addressing it. Don't let it go beyond us. Don't think it's going away. It is taken from the first paragraph of the official outcome document of the 2012 Rio Plus 20 conference. So they're telling you that as they say this, they keep building. They keep building on the prior authorities that they've been going on. I'll tell you, in law, that is international law anyway, that establishes actual power because no one threw it off. In the United States, which is not throwing it off but embracing it, we do not yet have, I'm talking about the government now, not you folks. See, this is our point. We have to step up. The United States as a government, or the United States as an entity, or a corporation, see, if it agrees on corporate governance structures, then it must be a corporation too. Another proof that part is the corporation. There is one that's not necessarily the kind of corporation you're thinking of, but in fact, there's another style sitting there. There's the people in aggregate, which is considered a corporation, but it's not. The corporation is a legal entity, legal fiction that way. In the United States, we do not yet have a comprehensive legislative framework that embraces sustainability. Okay, so that's what they're working toward, and that's what their real problem has been. But they say now, here we're back to the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, above quoted, is widely seen as providing the best current articulation of a unified environmental, economic, and social perspective. I think that's quite a misstatement because it can't, where it balances in favor of mankind's environment, which it's not humankind, it's mankind in the law. They can't even touch this. This is the third rail to this whole system. So this is the rub right here. I just point out. Perhaps the leading edge of the overall federal sustainability activity is Executive Order 13514, signed by the unqualified one in 2009, which directs federal agencies to set sustainability goals for their building and operations. So this guy is part and parcel to this heinous evil being brought in that the Pope is going to grab the mantle for. As I predicted would happen when this guy hit the stage. Many believe that it will not be long before these efforts lead to the development in the United States of a national sustainability plan and national strategy on sustainability, along with the necessary institutional changes in supporting metrics. Metrics is data collection and monitoring, folks. This is what they're doing. This is the threats that they'll put on everybody. By you feeding into their electronic devices that gives all this information. You think I don't do anything wrong. They don't care. They're going to use your activity against you. It doesn't matter how innocent it is. Remember, Cain killed an innocent brother. They don't care how much they destroy you and use you and abuse you. They figured out if they don't kill you, they get actually more out of you. Many believe that it will not be long before these efforts are led to the development, which means that they haven't been getting much resistance, and the infrastructure for this is inside the system. Necessary institutional changes, that should scare you to no end. That is a declaration of war against the Republican form of representative government, folks. What we sued to enjoin, and we're gonna have to move to enforcement, but we got a little voice in a pretty big world here. Doesn't mean we're not going to be yelling and screaming and doing what we need to do. We're not going to actually yell and scream. We're actually be pretty discreet on what we do. So no one may notice anything. Again, we're still in a war, right? Nearly all the other developed countries are ready and are progressing progress towards sustainability through the use of national councils for sustainable development strategies, and sustainable development indicators. When you hear all these things, that's what they're talking about. They're advancing this, and the authors and the promoters and the judgment makers of which are the Bar Association. Through the implementation of this resolution, the ABA will prepare itself and the legal profession for inevitable transition to sustainability in both governmental and private sector decision-making. Inevitable, folks. That's you. Inevitable. They don't care that you're even there. And they don't care because they hear crickets, like I hear crickets. It's inevitable. These people don't have a plan B. This is how you win the war. It's inevitable transition. If you don't understand the importance of that statement, again, you need to pay attention. It's right there. You don't have to pay that much attention anymore. These guys are coming right at us with this stuff. Resolved that the Bar Association urges the United Nations and each nation of the world to adopt and implement appropriate measures to ensure that activities within its jurisdiction or control will be conducted with respect for nature, capital N, and in a manner that accounts for the interests of present and future generation. Interests, folks, that's a monetary term. Interests. Which generations they talk about, you or them? Whose interests? To develop and foster policies and long-term strategic plans. Another term you should be listening for. They do these strategic plans in all jurisdictions for sustainable development, encouraging the betterment of human life through conservation and efficient use of natural resources, and to cooperate with other nations and with international organizations in developing regional and worldwide arrangements to preserve and protect the environment and to mitigate the effects of environmental damage. Conservation and efficient use of natural resources is austerity, folks. And they put you on a baseline that's above poverty. They'll define what poverty is just above that, so they can say they remove poverty, but they put everybody in austerity. And their biggest problem is the middle class, such that it may be or not be, as they've been destroying that, taking away the problem. The challenge for them is the middle class, who won't be liking this. But the next generation coming doesn't even know what the middle class is, so don't think that it's going to last for very long, because it's inevitable by these people's plan, folks. Why? Because we all been crickets. It's that simple. Perhaps the most prominent and most recent resolution of 2003 resolution, again tying back the chain of evidence of how they're integrating all this and creating authorities over time that become the authority, that was prompted by the ABA's participation in the World Summit on Sustainable Development. Were you participating in the World Summit, folks? Did they ask you? No. In Johannesburg in 2002, the 2003 resolution recognized that good governance and rule of law are essential to achieving sustainable development. So, as long as the rule of law exists, they will achieve the inevitable, folks. Rule of law is them. It's the attorneys. It's why I'm sure, in a different way, miners threw every attorney that came into a mining camp out on their ear. Whether they went on a rail full of tar, feathers, or with a rope on their neck, they went out of town quick. So that culture had the right idea, apparently, because if a lawyer can do this, they knew it, they kicked them out. You kick them out, they can't do it. So here's a weakness as well as a fact. If they want to, good governance is what they impose. If you agree to the Model Business Corporation Act by applying for any of their benefits underneath that system, you give them the power to achieve sustainable development. It's all the traps are all around us, and we've been crickets, and they have heard the silence. It's also encouraged governments, including the United States, federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial bodies, as well as business, non-governmental organizations, and other entities to promote sustainable development, including by adopting and implementing appropriate measures with respect to their own facilities and activities. So their facilities is the block and mortar. The activities is everything they do. Everything. The concluding sentence of the 2003 resolution report captures the ABA's current position very well. So it doesn't change what they do. This resolution, quote, this resolution is important to the ABA because it positions the ABA to play a significant role in the United States internationally in supporting efforts to achieve sustainable development, including through partnerships with governments and other entities. There's fascism right there in that definition, but they're playing a significant role, and they're well positioned. They've been there. They're just acknowledging it. They've been there since 2003 and before. This is critical to understand. As long as these people are in play, in power, in any kind of a consequence, in positions of influence, sustainability is inevitable. Partly why we attacked them, right? We hit them right between the eyes and said, you guys are criminals. You guys are committing treason, sedition, whatever else you're committing. You guys are doing, you've done a foreign insurrection within the border. And we heard crickets, so we at least got it on the record in a court of law that they couldn't touch. More recent resolutions have built on the foundation of the 1991 and 2003 resolutions celebrating of the ABA's commitment to sustainability. So Well, I have some more things highlighted here. It goes on and on and on. I'm running out of time. I want to get to this other thing that's now what they're implementing. You see here, as they come up, they start building. It's building to something, folks. This is how you see how it's coming. It's a freight train coming down on us. It's the one, if we're facing the wrong direction on the train, at the 611 in Norfolk runs us over. Folks, I've been trying to talk as consistently and find metaphors and ideas that all tie to this condition that's coming down on us. A couple more things. Here's how arrogant these people are. It says our human resources, our natural resources, our planet, our world. Who are these people? But listen to how arrogant they are. They're going to do it. It's inevitable, folks. Crickets, it's inevitable. On June 22nd, 2012, the conference approved an outcome document. This is the same type of outcome alternatives they impose on every public land plan, every strategic plan, every goal-setting measure that's under sustainable cities and all this other nonsense that's outcome-based. That's education. Outcome-based. No one left behind. Why? Because everyone's dragged to the base minimum. Everyone. No one excels. It's all equal. Well, except unless you want to put the Confederate flag on your T-shirt. Listen carefully. The outcome document was titled "The Future We Want." The future we want. Were you included in the we, folks? And this is a legal entity, the Bar Association, that's talking as if they have the right to say the future we want, which is a common vision. Communist. Worse, folks. I just throw this stuff out just to get your mind to focus on some of these words. I don't know if you're hearing them or not. Common vision. Vision. They use this term all the time. It's their vision. It's their this nightmare for us. It's a euphoric dream for them. Vision. For how sustainable development issues will be dealt with in the future by the United Nations. You won't, your local government won't, your national government won't. And you're going to hear that Agenda 2030. And it's going quick. I'm going to barely get to that. I'm going to get a little bit of it so you hear it. But they're telling us that it's going to be dealt with by the United Nations. It's inevitable. The future we want begins with common vision. Did they ask you, folks? Is it your common vision? No, we're blind to this. We recognize that people are at the center of, we recognize that people are at the center of sustainable development, and in this regard we strive for a world that is just, equitable, and inclusive. Who determines that? We commit to work together to promote sustained and inclusive economic growth, sustainable development, environmental protections, and thereby to benefit all. They have claimed a mantle for you, and if you remain quiet, they do what they've done ever since they put this stuff on forever. They claim authority to represent the whole of a subject matter, and anybody who doesn't speak, then they are now subsumed by whatever decision that authority that can protect that authority to say does protect that authority. To benefit of all here. They're claiming the mantle for your position right there. The next section of the agreement, renewing political commitment. That's all this is, folks. The Pope is nothing but a political creature. Everyone says, I didn't know he was a political creature. Yeah, that's all this is. Now, they're implementing sovereignty. You're being affected by politics, and you haven't figured that out. Essentially, this reaffirms the original Earth Summit commitments as well as the commitments made in other conferences. So again, building on the future we want, having nothing to do with you, but this future we want, them, endorses greening the Bar Association, your legal representatives, you understand, your court systems, the rules by which they advance these things. You have to understand how controlling this whole condition is. The same people that advance the laws because they're in the legislature, the same ones that are in the judiciary to decide what the legislature just did, the same ones the legal councils that advise the legislature who's supposed to have an inherent power to stop the aggrandizement of other branches beyond their authority, that won't, because the attorneys are sitting there to advise against it. If you don't understand how controlled the framework of your world is, I'm asking you to start paying attention a little bit better and at least come get these documents on the Blogcaster. The agreement then describes uneven progress in moving towards sustainability and recognizes the need to accelerate progress. So the unevenness is where you step up, you provide, you can stop the progress in that, not just make it uneven, it just stops it for your sector in this war. So I need to move on here. I've only got a half an hour now. Just time flies. There's so much to say. It's right here in our face. Nothing has ever been secret. The future we want is their future that they want at your expense, and you'll hear that. I double highlighted something here. I'll read. Maybe that's what I'll do. I'll just go down through, read my double highlights to try and expose something else. The Environmental Law Institute, it's an organization, most recent review of United States sustainability activities even provides a framework for actions to accelerate the transition to sustainability, folks. It's in play, it's in place, and it's inevitable. And it's inevitable because we have crickets for people. The laws also include the repeal and modification of laws that foster unsustainable development. That's the attack on the 1872 mining law, which is an attack on your property law because a mining law developed a patent to every disposed property. It disposed the highways, folks, to you, the people, as a pre-existing claim of possession, which we are completely clueless to, that has absolutely shut this ability down. It's unsustainable development. That's exactly where you want to be, and it's exactly where you stand on the law, because the law is unsustainable development. Why? Because it's already developed. It's already best used. It's already beyond scientific best practices. It's so simple, the answer. One thing they focus on, which is very important here, they're moving to foster sustainability through, this is what they're a commitment to, through the existing and new public service and pro bono activities. They're willing to give their life to do this. If you didn't think these are zealots. And a prominent example within the ABA is the 1 Million Trees Project, which involves tree planting projects around the country to improve quality of life and aesthetics in communities and address climate change. That is a key statement as to the lack of value that they're pushing as value to try and destroy your property values. You destroy the real value in your life as an aesthetic. There's no organized, certified authority that will place any value on an aesthetic. That these guys are pushing that and this quality of life, which is another aesthetic, and they don't tell you the kind of quality of life, is pushing it as value. And when you don't say no about that, you don't counter it, you lose. They bring this aesthetic, the visual landscape, the clear, pristine waters, the clean air. It's all a facade under aesthetics. How nice the tree looks, how good the birds feel, aesthetics. And there's no value in them, but this is what this document produces as their only tool, actually, because they can't touch property. They can only interfere with it. The ABA is a growing importance to the ABA of sustainable activities that touch the law profession, clients, governments, and the public. Who else is untouched, folks? So that's let me just finish there. A lot more to say. I am running out of time, but I do want to get over to this document. Why? Because it's the document of the week. It's going to be the document of your life, at least for the next 15 years, as they change to the next strategic plan, until the crickets stop being crickets and become the people with the power that act in response to their own defense, transforming our world. Transforming our world. Listen to the words. This is from the Agenda for Sustainable Development. Whose world, folks? Who's taking the claim? Who are these people? They're claiming the world. Who is that? Have you read the international documents of who has done this? They've actually claimed the world. My research says that if they have claimed the world and they granted a piece to me, they have no more claim. as soon as they have no more claim because of if law actually rules, not rule of law, but law actually rules, they've divested themselves of that portion. I now have a secondary jurisdiction wholly separate and apart, exclusive for myself against them. And every property owner in the United States of America has that, if they only knew the power of the disposals that this agenda destroys. The preamble, the agenda, this is 2030 now. 15 more years that they're going to run this thing in. The agenda is a plan of action for people, planet, and prosperity. We have to learn what the definition of prosperity is. It also seeks to strengthen universal peace and larger freedom. Universal peace is only when you agree to them, because you're not under peace as long as you're not. They're going to attack you until you agree with them. Universal peace and larger freedom. What is they saying? Inside the sustainability infrastructure framework they're creating for you. As long as you stay inside there, it's going to be peaceful for you. Your life will be hell, but that doesn't matter. That's not your world. That's their world that they set up for you. We recognize the eradication of poverty. You have to find out what that is. And all its forms and dimensions. All its forms and dimensions. How broad the scope. They don't even define this. What is the dimensions? As we play on a multidimensional chessboard here. Including extreme poverty. Oh, so extreme poverty wasn't included in the word poverty that they had to actually mention specifically. It is the greatest global challenge and an indispensable requirement for sustainable development. Oh, global challenge and indispensable requirement for sustainable development. In other words, it's a tool of plunder they're using. This thing called poverty. All countries and all stakeholders acting in collaborative partnership will implement this plan. So not you, not the people, not those citizens, not the human resources, just stakeholders in countries. In collaborative partnership. That's consensus-based felony. That's people taking claim for something they have no laws and right to do, no property to do, and imposing their color of authority to steal, theft by extortion, steal your stuff. It's right here in these paragraphs if you knew what to read. They're telling you they're coming as a master plunderer. There is nothing so despicable that they won't do. All countries and stakeholders, not you. You're not involved. We are resolved to free the human race, not people, not we the peoples, as they talk about, from tyranny of poverty. By imposing austerity, folks. You're going to be relieved of the tyranny of poverty and by imposed austerity. And as they go on, want to heal and secure our planet. From what? Our planet. Their possession? Heal and secure. What technology exists to do that? I'm all for big thinking, folks, but come on. They're talking about you here. They're not talking about their planet. They're talking about the world. We're talking about Gaia. We are determined to take the hold and transformative steps which are urgently needed to shift the world onto a sustainable and resilient path. The resilience is their control. It's all the functions that make it them more able to cope with how you're going to not like it. Sustaining them as we embark on this collective journey. Did they ask you, folks? We pledge that no one will be left behind. That includes you. Crickets? They don't care. They've taken the mantle of possession over your decision. They could care less about your consent. The goals and targets will stimulate action over the next 15 years in areas of critical importance for humanity on the planet. Not the peoples of the planet. Not the peoples, but humanity. People. As a definition here, we are determined to end poverty and hunger in all their forms and dimensions, and to ensure that all human beings can fully fulfill their potential in dignity and equality and in a healthy environment that they determine. You will be given all dimensions is when they define your dimension to be a certain level. That will be fulfilling all the dimensions that you are entitled. Prosperity. We are determined to ensure that all human beings, not the peoples, But all human beings can enjoy prosperous and fulfilling lives. That economic, social, and technological process occurs in harmony with nature. If you didn't see, think Silent Weapons and Quiet Wars is integrated here. Technological progress, the progressives, will be used to monitor data collection, evaluation, and adaptation to keep ahead of you. This word prosperity, though, is very interesting because it's redefined in Section 8. So if I go quickly down to Section 8, I left myself a note. We envision a world of universal respect for human rights and human dignity, the rule of law, justice, equality, and non-discrimination, of respect for race, ethnicity, and cultural diversity, and of equal opportunity, permitting the full realization of human potential and contributing to shared prosperity. So prosperity is shared prosperity, as you are given the opportunity to contribute to this common existence in austerity, just above poverty. And we already know that they could care less about cultural diversity, because if you're outside of this, they'll call you a heretic, they'll say you're a denier, that you just say you're an enemy. So this word prosperity is actually your obligation and duty to contribute to shared prosperity. So let's go back up, go through some of this stuff. That was what prosperity means. When you understand it's shared prosperity, it's not really your thought about prosperity and being prosperous. Human beings can enjoy the obligation of contribution to shared prosperity in fulfilling lives, and that economic, social, and technological process occurs in harmony with nature. What nature? It's their nature, what they need to have done. So much to read, I'm not going to get there. Let me kind of cut through some of this. A principle of common, our vision, we have another their vision, we're blind to it, but they have a vision. In these goals and targets, we are setting out supremely ambitious and transformational vision. What did they say about transforming our world? We envision a world free of poverty. They didn't say free of austerity here, so that's what they're going to impose. Hunger, disease, and want. Where all life can thrive. All life. See, there's no distinction here about mankind's condition of his proper utilization of the world for his needs. These people can believe that all life is decided by them. We envision a world free of fear and violence. Now, how is that possible when this is forced contribution? How are they going to enforce this without imposing fear at the point of violence? Where physical, mental, and social well-being are assured. How is that under human rights, where we found out someone who didn't want to consent to their own death said, the World Court at this point said that had no bearing on what the state said. That wish to not die wasn't within the power of the individual to decide. A world where human habitats are safe. Habitrails, folks, habitats. They think you're a little animal here. Resilient and sustainable. In other words, they've applied you will live within their urbanite centers. And where there is universal access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy. This is what it's about, energy. In all of its sustaining factors, everything you need is going to be the sustainable energy underneath their control. We envision a world of universal respect for human rights and human dignity, the rule of law, justice, equality, and non-discrimination. That's number 8 again. Let me go back to that, and it was important to visit. Remember, rule of law is integral with the inevitability of this implementation. Equality is that you will be contributing shared prosperity to the state. And they don't care your race and diversity and culture, your thoughts about all that. Universal respect for human rights is no respect. It's only respect for the limitation that the state controls your rights. Go read the Declaration of Human Rights and read for that. We envision a world where every country enjoys sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth and decent work for all. Who decides what that is? It's those that will decide your contribution to shared prosperity. That's what will be decent. Everything else will be undecent. Everything else, like property rights and your right to go and determine how you will make your way and be independent, will be conditioned to be indecent. one in which democracy, good governance, and the rule of law, as well as an enabling environment at national and international levels, are essential for sustainable development, including sustained and inclusive economic growth, social development, environmental protection, and the eradication of poverty and hunger. Well, how is it going to be all inclusive and do that unless they make a definition that they force you into using fear and violence? A democracy, not a republic, but a democracy of corporate good governance, corporate structure under the UN system with the rule of law. In other words, the rule of law, these attorneys are indispensable to the fulfillment of this. One in which the development of the application of technology are climate sensitive, respect biodiversity, and are resilient. This resilience is this system that imposes this biodiversity for all life, notwithstanding it's the fact that to do so you have to not use, and everybody's going to be imposed to use less, probably by the pressure of costing more by taxation as well. Climate sensitive technology. Why? Because they got to. This is what this climate encyclical is going to push as being the big threat we are to all this. The technologies, technocracy, and that's only part of it. I don't agree with people that say we're going into technocracy. No, this is a part. This is one of the parts of how they continue to move this along, dealing in outcomes always. They have a goal, folks. They have an outcome. They don't have a plan B. And my experience looks at people who don't have a plan B. They're pretty successful, unless you can stop them. And it takes all that energy to do that. Our world today. Is it your world, folks? No, our world. Are they to ask you, did you go to the meetings? No, that's theirs. We are meeting at a time of immense challenges to sustainable development. Yes, you're just catching on. If you just stop being crickets, it's over for them. The challenges and commitments contained in these major conferences, which they named before, are interrelated and call for integrated solutions. The Solutions Network, folks, this is run across the United States of America. Integration, absorbing you into the Borg. Preserving the planet. For what? We're going to put it in a big jar? We're going to eat it later with crackers? What? For the aliens to come? Preserving it. For what? Creating sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth and fostering social inclusion are linked to each other and are interdependent. There's no independence in this at all. Nothing. Natural resource depletion and adverse impacts on environmental degradation, including desertification, drought, land degradation, fresh water scarcity, and loss of diversity, add to and exacerbate the list of challenges which humanity faces, which they are going to use. This is a list of what they're using against humanity to get them to the brink, to get them to accept. Why would they be advancing desertification? And isn't that what they're doing when they destroy dams? Isn't that to plan here? Freshwater scarcity is an invention. This is all they're telling you how they're going to come at you. Climate change is one of the greatest challenges of our time, and its adverse impacts undermine the ability of all countries to achieve sustainable development. Does it? It's a fraud. The challenge is that people are finding out about it. It is also, however, a time of immense opportunity. Significant progress. Significant progress. What progress? I thought it was good enough that I had my piece of land and I could work it for myself. What more do I want but independence and the self-reliant nature? I'm worthy of my hire that I can keep on. Why do these people have to make progress on that? Who asked me? That's you, folks. Who asked you? The significant progress has been made in meeting many development challenges. In other words, they do the monitoring, the data collection, the evaluation. They figure out how to adapt to your resistance. And they're very good at it. The spread of information and communication technology and global interconnectedness have great potential to accelerate human progress. In other words, to accelerate this plunder. The same technology you can use to become empowered is the same technology they're going to use to take it all away from you. Almost 15 years ago, the Millennial Project goals were agreed. Those provided an important framework for development and significant progress has been made in a number of areas, but the progress has been uneven. Why? Because every time you find out about this stuff and step up, you stop them in their development progress in that point. In particular, those related to material newborn and child health and to reproductive health, if you didn't think this was about eugenics. This is something the Pope is bringing on, folks. In scope, however, this framework, Agenda 2030, they're announcing today, goes beyond these Millennial Development Goals. They're moving faster and faster, folks. It's a new agenda now. They come under the human rights and international law related together. They're coming to take everything out. We will work for a significant increase in investments to close the gender gap and strengthen support for institutions in relation to gender equality and the empowerment of women at the global, regional, and national levels. All forms of discrimination and violence against women and girls will be eliminated, including the engagement of men and boys. If you didn't think there was a war that they're developing, that they're fabricated to bring men and boys against women and girls. You can't even have an engagement to a woman as a man anymore. That's no good. The systemic mainstreaming of gender perspective in the implementation of the agenda is crucial. They have to bring up the social justice gender condition because it's critical to cause a division in people. But remember, full human potential is a shared prosperity. You'll have to have a permit to reproduce underneath that goal if you haven't figured out how this stuff starts to work. The people who are vulnerable must be empowered. Why are they coming to steal from you for that, though? Those whose needs are reflected in the agenda include all children, youth, persons with disabilities, and whom more than 80% live in poverty, people living with HIV/AIDS, older persons, indigenous peoples, refugees, and internally displaced persons and migrants. Syria, bunch of migration going on. Why are they doing that? They know it's part of the plan. They make this stuff to do this. They create these refugees to enforce what they're bringing on. We resolve to take further effective measures and actions in conformity with international law to remove what international law is, the UN system, folks, is to remove obstacles and constraints, strengthen and support, and meet the special needs of people living in areas affected by complex humanitarian emergencies and in areas affected by terrorism. What about the world is not affected by terrorism? This, as I call it, is the human shield provision. They use all the disabled people to come against you, make you the one who's the problem. Now, let me see if I can find really what I wanted to get to, because I don't have many times. Oh, there's a human trafficking goal. This is where the refugees come in. We recognize the positive contribution of migrants for inclusive growth and sustainable development. We also recognize the internal migration is a multidimensional reality of major relevance for the development of countries of origin, transit, and destination, which requires a coherent and comprehensive responses. If you didn't hear that this is a plan to get migration to go to help the destination countries, as well as remove these people back to a developing country somewhere to put them to work at a baseline level. This is the human trafficking goal right here. And they deny that human trafficking happens, and they denounce it, but they commit it right here in this passage 29. We will cooperate internationally to ensure safe, orderly, and regular migration involving full respect for human rights, which we know don't exist, but to the state, and humane treatment of migrants, regardless of migration status, of refugee and displaced persons. Such cooperation should also strengthen the resilience of communities hosting refugees, particularly in developing countries. We underline the right of migrants to return to their country of citizenship and recall the states must ensure that their returning nationals are duly received. But who are these people to declare all this? They have underlined the rights. Who cares? I got an underline of a right. So what? Who are these people that push people to have to migrate because it advances sustainable development of both the country of origin, the destination, and the country of origin and the destination. This is human trafficking on a global level. What migrant would go back to a country that's being perpetually bombed? So they may underline the right, but the guy's never going to ask for it because he's not going to, like the little kid, just stop bombing my country and I'll go back. Well, that doesn't ever happen. with having the likely chance of holding the increase in global average temperature as one of the acknowledgments in the UNFCCC and the primary international intergovernmental forum for negotiating the global response to climate change is a problem, because 800,000 years ago it was hotter by 10 degrees. It's a false condition. It naturally gets hotter. That I needed to get down, and I'm going to miss it, I think. I can't find it here. This thing goes on and on and on of the problems. But I needed to find this one little aspect quickly if I can. It is what this whole thing is really about. You've got the human trafficking, which is really just a monetary thing. It's a fiscal thing advanced to the it'll be a Hunger Games provision is written in here, number 37. The Colosseum Games is written. The United Nations system and other actors will be mobilizing these resources to come after it. They tell us it's an economic debt-based slave system in this, and there's so much to read. I got so far away to go that I'm not finding it, and I'm disappointed now. I got to find this thing. Where did I put it? Oh, here it might be. Oh, the goals. There it is. Goal 17, strengthen the means of implementation and revitalization of global partnership for sustainable development finance. 17.1, strengthen domestic resource mobilization, including through international support to developing countries to improve domestic capacity for tax and other revenue collection. This is what it's all about. They put you in austerity conditions to put a tax and revenue system for collection back to the system that's going to steal the money from the developed nations and give it to the undeveloped nations to make infrastructure to bring these migrants in, to put them under austerity, to make them tax collection systems to go back to the system that was created by the developing countries. Mobilizing advanced financial resources for developing countries from multiple sources. This is leveraged financing. Assist developing countries in attaining long-term debt sustainability through coordinated policies aimed at fostering debt financing, debt relief, and debt restructuring as appropriate, and address the external debt of highly indebted poor countries and reduce debt distress, is to create a continuing slave debt system that is sustainable and pays them the dividends for the investments that they're doing. Written right here in the finance part, this is about debt. I've been telling you this all. This is a financial construct to move people into places, to put them into sustainable debt. If you didn't understand, the FRN is the same condition, now gone global. Your money is going to be local, is going to be the funny money they pay you, but the debt system that they're setting up is utilizing financial resources from multiple sources. They adopt and implement investment promotion regimes for the least developed country. They're going to plunder the other countries. So there it is. I got to most of it. I hope you see now. It's written right in the document of the agenda for 2030. The Pope is coming to underwrite this. This guy, he's taking the mantle of authority under a moral authority I told you does not exist. He has no moral authority. He's concentrated evil. You can almost say, I guess we could say satanic at some level. This is not of this world. Someone's come to claim the world, and the crickets are going to allow it. We got to stop allowing it. The plan's right here for us to read. You'll have all the links here. I went through, read some of it. You need to read most of it, and you can go local to stop this, folks. We're doing it in lots of places. Thank you for tuning in today. Again, as you can, Grimner at worldreallibertymedia.com has the place for the website for me. Sets it up that I can be here. WorldTruth.org has the servers. You say why Jules sets up place and time for me to be here. All y'all in the chats that I don't get to, just too distracting, but I do appreciate all you there. Please donate to these people that allow this voice to go out. I don't think that there's many many like myself that do this at this point, but we certainly need more of us. And it's not over. It's kind of exciting. I told you it's exciting. Here's the plan. Why I don't know why we're having crickets. But take care. I'll talk with you next week.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
So that's what Opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.